The year was 625, and the red hills of Uhud stood silent, for now, but soon they would echo with the clash of steel and the cries of the dying. What began as an act of revenge for a previous defeat would spiral into bloodshed and end with a poet's life cut short, not for crimes of war, but for words. This is the story of a battle remembered for its brutality, and the silencing of a voice that dared to speak. The Quraysh of Mecca had not forgotten Badr, the humiliation of that loss. Their leaders dead, their pride shattered, burned deep. Now, they marched with a force of 3,000, determined to erase the shame and teach Medina a lesson it would never forget. For the Muslims, led by Muhammad, this was not just another battle. It was a fight for dominance in Arabia. For everyone caught in between, it was a storm they could not escape. The Muslims numbered barely 700. At first, they took positions that gave them the high ground. Archers were placed to guard a crucial pass, warned never to leave their posts. Early in the day, the tide seemed to favor them. The Quraysh began to retreat, and the thrill of victory spread through Muhammad's ranks. But greed and overconfidence are dangerous companions on the battlefield. When the Muslim archers abandoned their post to collect spoils, the Meccan cavalry swept in from behind. Chaos erupted. The victory that had seemed certain crumbled into panic. Muhammad himself was wounded. Friends and family members fell where they stood. The hills ran red, and as the dust settled, the cost of this miscalculation became clear. 70 Muslims dead, countless wounded, and a victory for the Quraysh. Defeat brought more than grief. It brought suspicion, resentment, and a thirst for vengeance. The days after Uhud, the Muslims sought not only to recover from their losses, but to punish those they believed had mocked or opposed them. Among the names whispered for retribution was a woman, a poet whose verses had stung the pride of Medina's leaders. Her weapon was not a sword or spear, but rhyme and rhythm, and that was enough to seal her fate. Her name was Asma bint Marwan. She was no warrior, no military leader, just a mother, a citizen of Medina, and a poet whose words carried the weight of truth as she saw it. In her verses, she condemned the violence she saw rising in the city, and she challenged Muhammad's authority. She spoke for those too afraid to speak, questioning why dissent was being met with blood instead of dialogue. In a time when loyalty was demanded, her voice was seen as dangerous. In tribal Arabia, poetry was more than art. It was influence. A single poem could inspire a tribe to war or turn public opinion against a leader. Asma's words had begun to circulate, recited in marketplaces and whispered in gatherings. For Muhammad's followers still reeling from the loss at Uhud, her criticism was salt in an open wound. To them, silencing her became not just desirable, but necessary. One night, while Medina slept, an order was given. A man named Umair ibn Adi, a loyal supporter of Muhammad, was tasked with ending Asma's life. There would be no trial, no public accusation, no chance for her to defend herself. This was not about justice. It was about erasing a voice that refused to conform. Umair crept into her home under cover of darkness. Asma lay in her bed, her children sleeping beside her. There were no guards, no weapons, no resistance. The act was quick and silent. A blade drawn, a life taken. Her children woke to the horror of their mother's body beside them, the metallic scent of blood in the air, in the stillness. The message was clear. This is the price of speaking out. By morning, the killer returned to Muhammad, who, according to historical accounts, praised the act in Medina, fear deepened. If even a woman, unarmed and in her own home, could be slain for her words, then no one was safe from the reach of retribution. The killing of Asma bint Marwan was not the chaos of war. It was a deliberate execution of a civilian for the crime of dissent. Word of Asma's murder spread quickly through Medina. Mothers clutched their children tighter. Merchants lowered their voices in the marketplace. People who once spoke freely now chose their words with care, afraid their opinions might be their death sentence. The city was quieter, not because peace had been restored, but because fear had taken root. In the official narratives that followed, Asma's name was reduced to a footnote, her words dismissed as provocation. But those who had heard her poems remembered them. Verses that spoke against needless bloodshed, verses that dared to challenge authority. The killing had silenced her voice, but it had also immortalized her as a symbol of resistance. To Muhammad's followers, the elimination of critics like Asma was portrayed as necessary for the survival of their movement. But strip away the religious framing, and what remains is clear. A defenseless woman was killed in her own home for expressing an opinion. This was not the chaos of battle or the confusion of war. It was targeted, intentional, and personal. Her death was not an isolated act. Others who spoke out against Muhammad in poetry or prose would meet similar fates. The Battle of Uhud had been a military defeat, but in the days that followed, another kind of battle began. A war against words, and in that war, there were no survivors, only silence. Centuries later, the Battle of Uhud is often remembered for strategy, heroism, and loss. But beneath the layers of military history lies another truth, that in the shadows of war, dissenting voices were cut down without mercy. Asma bint Marwan's story is a reminder that the first casualty in any struggle for power is often the truth itself, and those brave enough to speak it